shifting the mindset around solution design can be quite challenging.
There is a common misconception of solution design as something nice to have rather than what I believe is must have.
Now, I would say it will be my favorite part of this podcast.
And the implementation team was super frustrated. The project got stuck.
How would you convince a skeptical stakeholder that investing time in a solution model is worth it?
Wow, we should have done it before.
Welcome to another episode of Pro Salesforce, the podcast where we share valuable Salesforce insights. I'm your host, Sergii, a Salesforce consultant here at Synebo. Before we get started, please don't forget to hit the like button. Today, we are diving into an often overlooked but critical part of successful Salesforce project, the solution model. A well-defined solution model isn't just a nice to have, it's a game changer. It acts as a blueprint for the project, making sure everyone from developers to stakeholders stays on the same page. In complex implementations, challenges like unclear requirements, misaligned communication, and poor documentation can throw things off track. Many of these problems come from not having a proper solution design or structured product management. My guest today is Sergiy Lemeshko, a Salesforce consultant. Hi, Sergiy.
Hi, I'm Sergey. Thank you for having me today. My journey with Salesforce started over a decade ago in 2012 as a Salesforce project manager. Now I'm a functional consultant specializing in sales and service cloud. And for the last 7 years, we've been working together with Synebo on projects here in Germany, helping our customers to make the most out of their Salesforce.
Super. So it means that you worked with Salesforce Classic UI more than with Lightning?
No, why? Sales Cloud is for both, for Classic and Lightning. It doesn't mean that nobody's working with Classic anymore.
I mean, you started a long time ago. Lightning is
I
such a
remember
new
that. That's what you mean. Of course, yes, it was Classic. Mostly it was Classic back then, yes. Lightning was not even there. I'm a dinosaur, almost.
Oh, we still have colleagues in our company who still prefer Classic over Lightning. All right, let's move on with today's topic. What are the most common challenges teams face in a large or complex Salesforce project?
Well, there are numerous challenges teams may face, but today I would like to focus on those which are stemming from the project management inefficiencies. In particular, challenges related to the solution model, like missing big picture showing end-to-end process, logical contradictions and gaps in the solution design, effectiveness of communication between the stakeholders, the importance of the framework for that communication, and also the issues around documentation where it's related to solution modeling. Those challenges are always leading to project timelines, accessing timelines, budget overruns, and eventually to the low user adoption.
Those are pretty common challenges. And why do you think these issues come up so often?
Because they have, in my opinion, they have a very one common root cause, which is basically the lack of proper solution design. It is nearly impossible to be efficient and to deliver a high-quality product without a clear understanding of what we are trying to build. It's not about uncertainty in detail, but it's rather lack of clarity on how end-to-end solution, about the integrity, about the solution as a whole. If you look at the typical Salesforce project, on one side, we have the customer with their business needs and expectations. On the other side, we have implementation team, which is good and has a great technical expertise. And something is missing in between, that connection, that mediator who can translate the business logic into a proper solution design, which can be easily picked up by the implementation team. Often this third party in between which plays, in my opinion, fundamental role for the project success, is simply missing and causing all those issues I mentioned before.
And those like third party and middle party, is it usually a Salesforce consultant?
I would keep it as an abstract role, let's say. Of course, I very often I do it as a Salesforce consultant on a project, but it's not necessarily to be the Salesforce consultant. It's not really about the role itself. It's about the result of that, and meaning that we need to have in the solution model in the proper format. Then this part of the work is very important. And whoever does it, sometimes it depends on the project. Sometimes it can be someone on the customer side. Sometimes I play this role. It depends, I would say.
Hmm. And why do you think the solution design phase is often neglected?
It's often neglected because people see it as time consuming and non essential, especially when they are under pressure to deliver quick results. There is a common misconception of solution design as something nice to have rather than what I believe is must have. So people believe they can simply skip it. Another reason which I notice is that humans are biased to use text. Text and verbal communication are the most natural forms of expressing ourselves, and that's why people, when they have to create describe what they want, they tend to use text. In the best case, they may use also tables to accompany that. But that's unfortunately not what we are talking about. When we mention proper solution design, it involves the solution model, which is basically a diagram format. And diagram is a proper format for the solution modeling because what is best to show the process is a process diagram. But it's a skill which requires some time to acquire, which requires some experience, and that actually stops many people who are not daily working with the diagrams. It stops them from trying it. And finally, due to the stigma that planning is something associated with outdated waterfall methodology, and everybody's trying to be agile these days, and that leads them to negatively pursue what is everything around planning and modeling that has this negative connotation in the eyes of people who driven by this hype of trying to start as soon as possible. This is basically one of the reasons why people do not tend not to spend too much time for initial stages of the project.
Hmm. So more about the mindset, and shifting the mindset around solution design can be quite challenging, especially when teams prioritize speed over strategy, as you mentioned. What do you think could help teams embrace the mindset that investing time in solution design upfront leads to better outcome?
Yes, it's always those who are not aware of long-term benefits of this approach we are talking about. They tend to believe that they can start without it and refine the solution as they go, using the format they prefer, and even skipping it. The solution modeling approach we advocate is simply not how people used to work in their daily life, daily routine. It requires a shift of mindset, if you want, and it doesn't happen on its own. It needs to be facilitating. And I think it is the best way is to introduce it, let them try it, let them see the results, how smooth projects are running if they have proper solution model. Compare it to the projects they've done before without a solution model. And then the advantages of this approach will quickly become clear, and the mindset will come that this is something of value for the project, in particular for Salesforce projects. Regarding the time aspect, people pursue it as something time consuming. I wouldn't say that to build a diagram takes more time than expressing the requirements in the form of the text. We as implementation team did it multiple times, so we know how to do it fast, so we're happy to take it over. So time is not an issue here. And that what we can easily explain to the customers and demonstrate also by taking over the role, preparing this diagram and showing them basically after the first draft can be done in hours.
Like from my point of view, it's more about the form. It's not just like you spend more time. It's just a different form to express the requirements.
Exactly. We are not
Mhm.
talking about extra time being added to the typical project management work. It's inevitable, right? It needs to be done. The requirements needs to be gathered, documented, organized some way. It's just about the approach which you use to do that. Instead of using the text tables or whatever are the conventional, very popular ways of doing that, we suggest that start with a diagram instead, work with a diagram format, make it a high level process diagram for your solution model, basically a central piece of the document in all your documentation. That's what we are suggesting. We are not suggesting any like completely out of nothing new type of work. It's just the way we see how the things which otherwise will be done in any project should be done.
Completely agree with you, and even myself, like despite the scale of the project, like if it's a new implementation, big data model, or if it's just a simple task to, for example, implement one object, I still will do some like drawings, diagrams, even for myself to understand it, and then to hand over it to implementer. It will be easy to the for implementer to understand what exactly should be done.
Right. Usually businesses know what they need. They can explain that from the business or customer perspective. But then we are coming to the point when this message needs to be communicated to the implementation team, which thinks in totally different language.
Yeah, exactly. And when teams skip the solution design phase, what is the impact on the project later on?
I would say it's unpredictable, can be anything, but it's nothing positive. The outcomes of skipping proper solution modeling can range from minor budget and timeline overruns to projects turning into never ending stories and overall disappointment. And almost certainly there will be some issues related to the project efficiency if that important part of the project is skipped. Even if the project without a solution model stays within the originally planned budget and timeline, it would still be more efficient if the solution model would be used in that project.
This brings us to the core of the matter, the solution model. It's often a key to avoiding such pitfalls. How would you define a solution model in simple terms? And why do you think it plays such a vital role in a successful project?
A solution model, how we understand it, is basically a structured representation of how a system or the process will function. It typically is a diagram that maps all the activities, events, and relations between those in Salesforce context. It provides a clear end-to-end view of the solution, aligning all the stakeholders, making it easy for everybody to understand the process and how it is going to be implemented in Salesforce. In simple terms, it is a business process written in Salesforce terms. It's important to use the right visual format for it, which is a process diagram or diagrams, depending on the complexity of the process we are trying to implement. And primarily, we focus on Salesforce part, of course, and the most relevant for us. But since we view the process as a complete one, end to end, everything else in outside Salesforce needs to be also represented on this flow diagram. And this is basically the theory behind it. And it's not a rocket science. You can find it everywhere. But I think what is really tricky part about it is how to create the good one and how to use it successfully. And that's what takes a little bit of skill and experience.
Many people can be afraid about it because, like in schema builder in Salesforce, there are different connections, and maybe people think that they need to know how to draw the master detail versus the lookup relation.
Yeah, Schema Builder is a great tool, but it's not what we need exactly. We are not using Schema Builder for solution models because it doesn't allow to view the solution as a process. It's great to use as the data model. That's where you can see all your object, all the relations without them, from the point of view how the data is stored in your solution and how it's related to each other, the objects related to each other. But yeah, so even though it's also not a complicated tool to use, it just serves different purposes. Solution model shows the dynamics from business, like from the beginning till the end, what happens, let's say, in the lead management process. It starts with lead creation, and then hopefully we have opportunity closed won or lead gets disqualified. You cannot see all those dynamics in the schema builder. It's serving the purpose of the data model.
Mm-hmm. And how does having a solution model in place help tackle those challenges you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, if you have this solution model, it allows you quickly analyze and improve your solution. When designed properly, the diagram format makes logical contradictions and gaps immediately visible. From the logical point of view, it helps us think in terms of scenarios, actions, and possible outcomes of those actions. You literally follow the decision tree, which is represented by this diagram. It presents the variations of the process. It's easy to understand format for any stakeholder. Anybody can find whatever they need about this process in the understandable format for them using this diagram. And it enables us to design a solid and coherent product, trying to reduce the waste of trial and error. When you go jumping into development, trying to prototype something which you later realize needs a rework or doesn't work or simply logically doesn't fit to the overall picture of your solution. The solution model diagram basically is a representation of that future product, and it allows you to see all those gaps and logical contradictions in that diagram, basically saving time on proving that something needs to be changed. You can do it in that diagram itself.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk more about the role of the process diagrams. Uh, what makes them such a powerful communication tool for teams and stakeholders?
Basically, I would say it's not just because it's powerful, but also it's a kind of, it simply makes sense. If you think of any product as a process, end-to-end process, which actually it is, um, what is the best way to explain the process is a process diagram, right? So you need to choose right format for each type of information. If you want to show let's say, some location of a country, you use the map, right, and point it on the map. You don't use the text to describe where this country is located in the world. The same is about diagrams. Diagram is basically the language for describing the process, and it has numerous benefits for communication. The flow format serves as a universal language. Everybody can read it. It's easy to read. Not everybody can write it, but everybody can read it easily without any preparation. One goes through with a diagram master is enough for everybody to be on the same page, being able to understand this diagram and later refer to it. It improves efficiency, as I mentioned before, by simply testing your ideas on the diagram. You can avoid those situations when you develop something or prototype something and you later realize that this doesn't fit to the solution, needs to be discontinued and replaced with something else. You do your first test even before the development even begins. You are saving a lot of time, a lot of resources. And finally, it provides an excellent navigation system to organize your documents. There are tons of documents in each project. It's requirements, it's user documentation, it's technical documentation. All that can be mapped through the references and links on your diagram. So whenever you think about the process, you pinpoint to the part which you're talking about, and that contains the references to all sorts of necessary documents you have maybe in external systems in other locations and so on.
Like I myself like to refer to the diagrams when when you can work with the customer for a long time, you can be not aware of some processes or aware, but not maybe you don't know the whole picture. Like as a Salesforce implementer, maybe you was focused on one specific thing, but when you need to understand how the process works, and if there is a diagram in place, it's really helpful instead of looking for a manager who can explain you the workflow. So
Absolutely. Looking for unhappy manager who has to explain it
yes,
to you 10 times already because he explained it to 9 other people before you.
yes.
It's no fun for the manager. So that's why ask them once, document it, and then everybody can refer to your diagram if they need to review it.
Mhm. And how are these diagrams different from the traditional BPMN, business process model annotation, or data models that some teams might already use?
Yeah, data model, as we mentioned already, was the example of Schema Builder, which is a great tool inbuilt in Salesforce setup. This lacks the dynamics. It doesn't show it. It shows your data, but it doesn't show it from the process point of view. So it serves different purposes. It's your data model. You can um, um, for that, you can use the Schema Builder. BPMN is more similar. It shows the dynamics, but it's solely from the business point of view. Typical BPMN can be created regardless of technical context for implementation. It is primarily designed to explain the process in more general terms from the user or business perspective. Technical part is not necessarily and usually not a part of the BPMN. A solution model combines both. It is a high-level representation of the process as BPMN, but it's done in the technical terms, in Salesforce terms in particular. So it provides end-to-end view of the solution. It focuses on both business processes and technical elements, and it ensures alignment between those business requirements and technical implementation. In short, while BPMN is a tool for modeling business processes specifically and solely, a solution model represents a holistic view of the solution, including business processes, technical systems, and integrations to the third systems.
Mhm. So let's take one example. Like in BPMN, it can be like one block where it say, for example, prospect captured, and then next step. But in the solution model, it can say like lead is created from different sources. Maybe sources will be described, or how's it? What's the difference?
Whatever you notion you used for the step in BPMN, I'm sorry, I forgot it. But that doesn't give us specific knowledge of where exactly user does it if we are talking about doing it in Salesforce, right? In our diagram in solution model, Salesforce solution model, it will be basically update of the lead. I will put it simple as a lead update or lead update with a little bit more details, like what kind of lead update, like gathering basic information, for example, or asking for missing contact details, something like that. And if you need more details, don't keep it in that diagram, not to overload it, but keep it in a separate document, what exactly needs to be updated and how, and up to the which fields needs to be updated with what are the rules and processes. You can keep it in a separate document. For the solution model, it's sufficient if you mark it as updating the lead, and then the reference maybe to the document which explains what exactly this update means from the user perspective.
Mhm. So this is like would be one of the way of balancing between creating detailed diagrams without like overloading it with too much information. Yeah.
Right. That's one of the factors which negatively affects adoption of the diagrams in the projects, is that they are they may be written according to the book, but they are so overloaded that nobody wants to read. Basically, the advantage of the diagram is that it's a much more simplified, leaner, and clearer format compared to the text. But if you overloaded it, you end up with something which is basically as complicated to understand as the extensive requirements written in the form of plain text.
So, what is the good diagram and how to build a good diagram?
Uh, well, there are certain principles you need to follow. Start with the main things and add complexity as it goes. First, map the main milestones, which is in many standard processes is the object lifecycle. If we are talking, for example, about the lead management process, you take the lead statuses. This is already a process, right? How a lead changes the statuses in all variations of it is basically a process. And this is the skeleton backbone of your future solution model. So start with that and add whatever needs to be added. Important is to keep it simple, but yet it should answer the key questions, the three key questions. Who/what does what with what? It sounds a bit complicated. Once again, who/what is user or automation, does what is a type of action or event happening. Are we talking about update, create, delete, view? And with what is which record actually this action is happening to. Are we talking about account, contact, opportunity, custom object, and so on. And don't keep it for too long to yourself. So you are building for the whole team as a diagram master, let's call this role. So as soon as you have the first end-to-end draft, it's already can be achieved during the first couple of hours you're working on that. Try to use it already in your next meeting. It gives you then the discussion with other stakeholders, presenting it to them. Using it in your discussion gives you another bit of information which you can map additionally. So basically, as long as the more you use it in your ongoing project discussions, the more valuable information you will get from the other stakeholders, giving you a hint how this diagram needs to evolve next. The practical advices is start high level, go into details. Sometimes it requires keeping high-level process as a separate one as your main document and creating sub-processes. In addition to that, if you have very extensive logic, a very extensive process, don't try to overload it, put everything on one process. Sometimes it makes sense to add sub-processes, introduce them, present them as separate diagrams if necessary, keep your main diagram let's say simple and easy to read.
Sorry for interrupting. You could say if the sub-process start to become complicated, it should be a separate diagram.
I would say if your main diagram, you start high level, meaning you start with one diagram, which is high level process representation. If it becomes too bulky, then you start thinking about introducing sub processes. And sub processes means separate diagrams, basically. Sub process, the only way you can call it sub process, it's not from the business point of view, even though they may have the term too. But for you as a diagram master, sub process means actually that you start a new diagram. On your main diagram, you keep one block, let's say, I don't know, a lead assignment, for example. And how this lead assignment is actually happening is also a kind of process, right? So there is a logic behind that you can isolate in a separate process diagram, create a link from the main diagram to that sub process and vice versa. And if somebody needs more details about how the lead assignment happens, then they can look up in the sub process. That's the sub process diagram. That's the basic rule.
Okay, let's get back to the next step.
Yeah, it should be relevant, and don't put anything what is nobody finds helpful, nobody actually needs it. It helps to keep it not overloaded with information nobody needs. So relevance, you get relevance from the feedback. try to remember that you are creating this diagram not only for yourself, but for absolutely everybody in the team, absolutely everybody, including the users. The solution diagram can easily be used as also the introduction in onboarding of new users. So it's absolutely everybody is affected, and you try to create something. This diagram should present the value for all types of stakeholders in the project. And if you do that, they will be actively using it. They will be giving you information what else do they need or what needs to be changed on the diagram, and that's also how you interact with your team and how you improve your tree to serve the purpose which it should do. And also references. It's sometimes, quite often actually, it's not this overlooked advantage of the diagram. What can you put on diagram? Actions, events, levels, maybe users, interactions with them. But what we suggest also to use it as the navigation system for your documentation. You create the references and links in your diagram to enable any user to quickly jump to all those tons of documentation around it, whether it's a user story or technical documentation or user documentation. It all can be mapped on the diagram. Instead of putting something directly on the diagram, if it's bulky, and if it's bulky then more bigger than one small box on the diagram, then already worse isolating it in a separate document and just using the link on your box in the diagram to provide this access to more details in some external document.
Yeah, and you already gave us a great example with the lead assignment. It can be just one block called lead assignment, but within it could be some complex process with the lead assignment, custom lead assignment processes per teams, regions. Okay, I think it will be a good question. Who should be responsible for creating and especially maintaining the solution model in the project?
Um, Again, that depends very much on the project itself. Ideally, it should be a dedicated product owner, let's call it that way. Since creating a robust solution model involves defining the process in terms of activities and events in Salesforce terms, this person should have a deep knowledge of Salesforce and ideally experience also with previous experience with building such solutions. Even the smaller projects where a full-time PO might not be a feasible option, the role remains essential, so never skip it. Somebody needs to play it. As I mentioned earlier, since that requires the diagram needs to be written in Salesforce terms, that somebody needs to be a person who knows Salesforce well. Sometimes the customer side insists on having their own PO. In that case, who often lacks the experience with Salesforce, they was doing some other products. In that case, we suggest working together with that PO to jointly develop this solution diagram, which we are talking about in the way how it should be done. And from my experience, one person is the best option. Not a good idea to allow different people work on the diagram to be able to change it, since at the end it may look like patchwork, which is then hard to read, and you definitely see that the styles are different, that the different people were working on it. It should not be the case. It should be one person who is able to digest this information and be able to present it in the way, in the best readable, understandable way. Multiple contributors can work effectively on the same diagram, but only, I would say, it's a special cases when they're well trained, when there are clear guidelines how those diagrams to be built, or when they are using the professional tool, which as such puts the limits or They have their own convention how to build those diagrams. So the tool itself imposes certain standard. In that case, if there is really a need for multiple people to work on same diagram, I would say it may work. But again, it's important to keep the same standard for those people.
So if, for example, Salesforce admin did some changes in the lead assignment process, it would be better to report to somebody who's responsible, in this case, product owner, what changes were done, and then the product owner should add them to the diagram, following like one style of writing and etc.
Right, except for I would suggest to do it other way around. So first we do the changes in the model itself. So first idea first. Yes, we have this idea to change something. We need to put it on the model, test it, so to say, review it on the model, how it looks in the diagram, how it still the solution is consistent and stable. And only then, if yes, then that change is undertaken in the system. Unless it's maybe admin did some, I don't know, UI layout minor change, which is not affecting our process, which we are trying to cover. In that case, obviously, that change can be done easily, and to reflect the change, you probably don't need to change your model, your main diagram. You do it in some document which describes how that UI should look like. If you change the layout, there is a document which mocks up that layout, and if you do those changes, change it in that document. Your main diagram remains in this example unchanged. The link is still there for that document. Is that you change the layout mockup, and in that case, no changes for diagram needed. Depends on the change.
So if we do the change in the solution model, then we can use this solution model as a new requirement for the new tasks, user stories, tickets, and once it's done, even for the documentation, yeah?
Right, right. So depending on the change, you either need to do it in diagram itself and the document, or only in the document and leave the diagram as such. It depends what kind of change it is. If the change influences the logic of the process, how the outflow of the process, then it needs to be reflected on a diagram. If it's more like UI or minor changes or some validation rules or whatever else, which is not affecting the integrity of our process logic, then the diagram change is not necessary. Then you can do it independently.
And how can the solution model be used as foundation for some, important documents?
Oh, that's what I mentioned with the system of links and references, and also how you use the solution model. We suggest that it becomes the cornerstone of your project, and anything we start with the model. We start with the model. It should be your homepage if you want. If you're addressing the new requirements or fixing the bugs or testing or handling some inquiries from the stakeholders, first reference point is your solution model, this main diagram. Its primary role as the coordinate system for providing context for helping to quickly locate what we are talking about, what this inquiry or what this requirement, change requirement is related to. We locate it on the main diagram, and then we from that diagram, we can quickly access all other documents which are related to that specific part of the process. It's not only illustrating the process itself, it's also the kind of a navigation system for all this otherwise disconnected documents which you have in your project. Imagine a project manager can quickly locate relevant requirements and tickets for a specific part of the process from this main diagram. The developers can find a shortcut to the technical implementation document, to the flows or components which they build, which are responsible for this part, which now, let's say, needs to be changed. The users can pinpoint the onboarding and training documentation materials which they need for any specific part in that process. And even the managers, sometimes we use it to show the progress of the project, the diagram itself. So even the top management can use it as a very high level overview of the progress on the implementation within in this project.
In my experience, I faced a lot of situations where documentation wasn't up to date. When developer, for example, didn't have enough time to update the documentation, or a customer doesn't want to invest more time to update documentation because for some reason, they think that it's not important. So, how do you ensure the solution model stays relevant as project requirements evolve?
Yeah, so it's that key principle. What I was talking about is make it cornerstone of your project. Use your model for everything, for any type of the communication within the project. At least it should be your starting point before you go into detail. Locate it on the main process and use the rule that if it's not on the map, if it's not on this process diagram, then it doesn't exist. Or to make it more positive, if we want to build something, it needs to be first represented on the diagram. We need to do that sanity integrity check on the diagram on the concept level before we start implementing it. And if the diagram master respects that rule and puts all the new requirements or all the new bits of information which came up in as the project goes on the tree first, then everybody else who have to work with that information, who have to follow up with their part of the work regarding this new change, they will have to, they're kind of forced to use the diagram as well. And that's how you make sure that your diagram is up to date. If you don't do any changes outside the diagram, you do the changes outside diagram, but do the changes in diagram first to reflect. If you do the changes first in diagram, then another step you check the integrity of your new solution with that bit of the change you added, and only then you implement it. Of course, if you do not follow this principle, you may end up with changes done in the system and not reflected on the diagram. In this way, diagram may be abandoned by the stakeholders because it's not up to date. Yeah, so it's a responsibility of the tree master or whoever it is, project manager, product owner. That person needs to make sure that this rule is followed. We first put it on diagram before we start working on that.
Yeah, so it's usually how it happens with the documentation, because documentation usually is updated after changes are implemented, and sometimes it can be neglected. But if it works the way you describe it, when you start with the diagram, it's just a part of the process, and there is like no way to skip it. Okay. Um, Now I would say it will be my favorite part of this podcast. Can you share a real world example of the project where a solution model helped save the project or make it significantly more efficient? Something interesting.
Without names.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there is one very good example which always comes to my mind. When I joined the project midway, so they started it already with the internal Salesforce team, and the product vision was basically, and all requirements was pages and pages of text. What I don't like, and this endless confluence pages, a few BPMN diagrams which were not covering the entire process they were trying to implement. Obviously, no solution model, no diagrams in terms of Salesforce as we wanted, as we see it. And the implementation team was super frustrated. The project got stuck. Basically, took already twice as much time as initially planned for it. Developers were frustrated. They couldn't understand the requirements. The management couldn't understand why it got stuck. So we suggested let's step back a little bit. By the way, it's never late to introduce them proper solution model. It helps even at the later stages of the project. So we suggested we introduce the solution model just to have this overview of where we are standing now. We did it. And their first reaction was the shock because it revealed so many gaps in which they had in their initial requirements. It's easy to overlook something if you just try to use text for that. Obviously, the diagram showed that what they want actually requires more. So the scope of the project exploded, and they realized that their previous timeline was unrealistic a bit. So they used our solution model. We reviewed it a little bit, reduced their product, and with the new model, actually they were able to proceed to start moving on the project. It like introducing a diagram is always so I don't like these big words, but it's a game changer. Like for the project, which is very complex and doesn't have one, it's a game changer if they get one. They may not understand it before, but once they get it, they see the advantages of it. And it's like you come to the room which is dark and you're turning on the light and it's full of people searching something, and they're like suddenly, wow, we should have done it before.
Hmm. Interesting. So in this case, when you built the first solution model, it was like the real solution model, and I assume you can also build an like kind of expected solution model that can play as a like roadmap and for future requirements. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, in cases when we are dealing with existing Salesforce system, which needs to be changed now, then we do two. We do two. One is how it is now, and then either we it depends again what on the complexity of those changes. If it's too complex, we may think about creating a separate solution model to draw all these new processes, or if it's a minor changes, we can map them on the same existing solution, map on the diagram, just using the color code to differentiate between the existing and the new version. It depends on the complexity of the change, but yeah.
Hmm. And how solution models differ between industries or business products? Is there a difference at all?
There are differences. I would say each solution model is unique, without a doubt. It's simply not possible to copy one to one some solution model from your previous project, even if it's nearest competitors. Their processes are unique because their vision, how they want to use Salesforce, is unique in a way. And very often the solution models can be more similar between in two projects from different industries than in two projects from the companies which are in the same industry. So it all depends on what they want to do, how they want to use it, their vision, how uh, much they want to customize their Salesforce. It makes it really a unique experience every time. You can use some drafts of the previous projects, but it will be changed for the new project almost to the point where you cannot recognize that old process in it.
Can you give advice for teams who just starting with solution models? What's like one piece of advice to help them succeed? Or maybe not one.
No, one piece of advice: try it. Try it, definitely. It worth trying. Try it also ideally with someone who did it before. So you don't spend I in my career I spent a lot of, I would say, years trying to polish how I do it. You can do the shortcut, get somebody who did it before. You already will be one step ahead, because that's if you are trying it for the first time independently, you are at the point where you can give up easily by not seeing by seeing it as something extra work you need to do. The learning curve stops you from trying it. But definitely try it, realize the value of it, make it central element of your project. Ensure it becomes the primary communication framework for all the stakeholders on the project. Whenever you discuss anything, whether it's a change in your requirement, anything, first have it open on the screen so everybody can follow. Very often it helps, like people are talking about the things which that in within one process you may have maybe an example, like we are talking about calling customer, right? Calling customer may happen multiple times in the process, and each call is actually a different one. And if you just refer to it as a call to the customer, it's hard to understand for different people sitting there. They see it from their perspective. And at the end, if you're not pinpointing it in the flow diagram, they may think about different locations of that call in the process. One may think about the initial call, one may think about the final call. So diagram helps to bring them to the same block in the process, and to create a high quality model based on involved feedback from all stakeholders. It should be user friendly, easy to read, not crowded with information. mm, and used. So as I said, the key is if you use it, it improves on its own, uh, improves its quality. If it's actively being used, applied, then you always get the feedback every time you use it for a certain discussion. You get a new bit of information which you add to your model, and with that your model grows, quality of that model, value of that model for the stakeholders grows.
How would you convince a skeptical stakeholder that investing time in a solution model is worth it?
First, what we need to understand is that we are not spending extra time. We mentioned it before. Some time will always have to be spent on project management, requirements gathering, and documentation. It's not about spending additional extra time on something, it's about how you do those things using a different approach, let's say, namely solution model. It does not take more time than writing pages of text to achieve the same result. But it definitely helps to save you time later during the implementation and testing, because reading diagrams is far more efficient way of than reading the text when we are talking about complex things which needs to be imagined. In a way, if you think that um, once you read the requirement, you can imagine it in two ways. Your head is like text is the code, is a cipher. A natural way to imagine any process is either the process diagram or from the user perspective in terms of the clicks, yeah, and changes. So it's definitely the argument which I use in when I'm convincing project team to adopt this method. Also, if they are skeptical about it, I'm very motivated about it. So I'm happy to take over this role, and I'm happy to do that. And I like the diagrams that I create more than diagrams created by other people, because simply because it's more clear for you. You created it. So I don't mind to create it. They should not worry that it costs them extra time. It will be on our side. It's basically a most effective way to define what needs to be done to align between a customer and developer. So it's absolutely necessary. Remember about these two sides, customer and the technical side, implementators. They do not speak the same language. The only possibility to bring them to the same common understanding is to use some format which is understandable for both of them, which is the BPMN kind of, but in Salesforce terms, which we were mentioning about before.
What is the one tool or resource you recommend to teams looking to improve their solution design process?
Oh, I wouldn't recommend one. Today, it's not like 15 years ago when I started, I had to do my diagrams in Excel. It still worked fine, but I wouldn't recommend doing it now, given that today we have a wide variety of tools which allow in that. And I would say with a very pretty basic functionality in terms of process building, you can achieve a great solution model. You can build the great diagrams. Mm, I would say there are two groups of products which you can use. One is the professional tools, which are dedicated for process modeling. They do nothing but that. And the other group is basically where diagramming or modeling tool is part of the main app. What I would definitely recommend, just try to look what your company is already using. Definitely would not recommend trying to buy professional tool. Usually they are not free. If you don't have one, don't try it. You don't really need it. It doesn't give you the advantage. It doesn't give you edge in creating a great model. It's more about the content of the model, not about the tool. Try to look at the tools which your company already using. Maybe you find some which have this component, or even sometimes companies already have this professional tools. I would say it depends on the situation. Among the most common ones, I would say Miro is the tool. It has a basic, they call it BPMN designer, but the way you use it, you don't create BPMN, you create a solution model. We were talking about a pretty great tool, pretty basic one, but you can do it. Glyphy is another example. Glyphy diagrams, I think it's called. It's sometimes part, not always, but sometimes part of your Confluence. Check that. Maybe you have it. And at the end, the tool you choose should be user-friendly, support easy collaboration between different stakeholders. It should be easily shareable, allow references in the diagram itself to the external documents, very important. And it should have unlimited or stretchable working space, so it can host all your complete diagram on it. Trying to squeeze your diagram in a, I don't know, PPT slide or in the Word document is not a good idea. It's simply not enough space. The working space should be stretchable. And remember, then don't go for super professional tools. You don't really need them to create a great solution model. So a great solution model is about content. It's not about the tool you are using. With a basic tool, you can, and the right approach and the right content, you can provide a great diagram which may do the change to your project.
Mm-hmm. So the content over the tool, and I can on the add, like, if you're going to present it to the customer, it's obviously should be a good looking, maybe branded, but it really doesn't matter in terms of the function.
I would say more usability and readability, if I may use that word, is more important than in which tool you did it. I would say you are more dependent on what maybe the company or the project team already using. If the Miro is already your main project app, then why not to draw your diagram also in that Miro board, which is already a main project framework, basically.
I personally when it's in the draft status, or we're just like brainstorming, I personally even prefer to put it on the paper and finalize it and then only draw it in some tool.
That's what you do when you need it quick. When you go to that guy who's always busy but knows the only one who knows what they want, you go with a paper, you draw it on the paper or on the tablet, and then you bring it to the nice format. Do it. Don't try to do it like depends on the situation, but the best one is when you um, not trying to do it on the fly with the stakeholder who is supposed to share their knowledge about the part of the process which you need to map now. Try to gather it quickly. Don't take too much of their time. Come, sit in peace, take your time, and then put it. It gives you the opportunity to think about it critically, about the process. That helps to spot those gaps. What else are you still missing from that department, from those users? What you still need to put on the map, or the questions you have, how it's supposed to work. Then better to put it on the diagram yourself and not rush it in during the meeting. During the meeting, you can collect it basically in any format. If you're good with memorizing the stuff, just keep it all in your head and then later put it on the diagram. It's up to you.
But I suggest personally, don't rely on your memory.
Yeah, you need to take some notes. I also don't have a good memory, so I do the notes.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm sure our listeners found it just as valuable as I did. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope it helps to convince somebody, and we will see more diagrams, more than text in the future, in our future projects.
I hope so. And thanks to everyone tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you in the next episode.